Chapter 12. During the night, a fierce wind that Margaret called a norther blew from Canada, icing the sky to a frosty blue. In the morning, Frances bundled up in one of Jake's old coats. Margaret handed her a pair of woolen gloves and wrapped a scarf around her neck. "As soon as we can, we'll drive into town and get you boys some proper clothes," she said. "I should have thought of it when we were in St. Joe. It's been a long time since we lost." For an instant, Margaret's eyes looked at something she could only see, but she took a deep breath and said matter-of-factly, "Since we had children in the house." Frances was so curious she spoke without thinking. "You had children?" "Yes," Margaret said. "2 boys. 8 years ago they died from diphtheria." "I'm sorry," Frances murmured, miserable that she had intruded on Margaret's pain. But Petey blurted out, "Is that why you took us, so you'd have children again?" "Petey," Frances scolded, but Margaret graciously smiled and nodded. "Yes, and 2 finer boys couldn't be found anywhere. Now get along with you, Frankie. Petey, where are the mittens I gave you?" Frances ran to the barn, the chill air stinging her cheeks. The barn was warm with heat from the animals and the pungent, earthy smells of their bodies and breath, hay and droppings. She glanced into the shadows at the back of the barn, but there was no sign that anyone had been there. Jake was already working on milking Dilly, the other cow, so Frances pulled off her gloves and set to milking Clover as she'd done it all her life, warming her cheek against Clover's body. After the cows had turned out and the pasture gate locked, Jake led Frances back to the barn and to a wall on which the horses' equipment hung. He pointed out and named the horses' harnesses, bits, reins, and all that was needed to hitch the horses to the wagon. "Think you can do it?" he asked. "Yes," Frances said. "Then let's give it a try." "Now," Frances gulped as she looked at the pair of tall, strong horses and stepped backward. Jake laughed. "They're gentle enough. They'll trust you once they get to know you." He entered the first stall, threw a bridle over Sal's head, and led her to Frances. "Here, hang off with one hand, stroke her nose with the other. Just keep talking to her. She likes that." The horses snorted air and stamped a lot, but Frances held her hands firm and her voice gentle. "Hop up on the seat," Jake said, when one of the horses had been hitched to the wagon. "You'll be driving the wagon at times. Best you learn how to do it." Her hands trembling with excitement, Frances took the reins and repeated all Jake's instructions as they drove the horse and the wagon down the road a short way back to the barn. Jake smiled at her. "You have an uncommonly gentle way with animals. They'll like working with you." By the time the wagon was unhitched and the horses turned out to pasture, Frances was proud of herself. She couldn't stop grinning, and she couldn't wait to tell Petey about what she'd done. And Mike and Danny would love to hear about it too. Maybe they'd be driving their own horses right now. She wished for a way to know at this very moment what they were doing. When Margaret called them at the noon meal, she announced that Petey was in bed with a cough and a light fever. By supper time, Margaret had caught the fever herself. Her face was flushed as she steadied herself against the back of the kitchen chair. "You go to bed," Frances told her. "I can do what needs to be done." "There's a pot of beef and barley soup on the stove," Margaret told her. Needs to be stirred now and then. Should be ready soon. Taste it, see if it needs salt or maybe another onion or—" Jake took Margaret's hand. "Get to bed. Frankie and I will take care of everything." "There's plenty of soup. I made more than enough." Margaret's glance flickered toward the barn. "Fine," Jake said. "Now come with me." As they left the kitchen, Frances pressed her nose against the window that overlooked the barn. She couldn't have missed Margaret's meaning. There was someone in the barn, someone that needed to be fed in addition to her family. Slaves en route to freedom? Frances was determined to find out. As soon as she heard Margaret and Jake's bedroom door close, Frances grabbed her coat from the hook near the back door and ran toward the barn. She lifted the bar that held the door closed for the night and squeezed inside. Shadows were dark and long. There was still enough daylight for her to see. The cows turned their big, curious eyes to stare at her, and the horses lifted their heads, blowing through their nostrils and deliberately bumping the sides of the stalls. By step, Frances walked to the back of the barn. Someone had been there. But someone had to be here, but where? She climbed the ladder high enough so she could see across the hayloft. No one there. Slowly she climbed down, facing the back of the barn. Frances looked around again. The loft extended at least 4 feet beyond the first floor of the barn. The outside walls of the barn were straight and unbroken. Then a realization hit her. There had to be a hidden room beyond Daisy's stall. Jake had made it clear the Underground Railroad shouldn't concern her, but she couldn't help herself. She ran her fingers up and down the boards, which were firm, until the pressure of her hands caused one to give a little. She pushed again, and the board held fast, as though someone were pressing even harder on the other side. There was a knothole on the second board, and Frances stretched on tiptoe to look through it. She wasn't totally surprised to discover an eye looking back at her. She stumbled back, letting out a yelp, as a hidden door in the wall swung inward. A black man stumbled out, and behind him stood a small, thin woman, whose shawl was wrapped closely around her back and shoulders. "I know you're the slaves the bounty hunters are looking for," Frances whispered. "Don't be afraid of me. I want to help you." The man's broad shoulders seemed to droop with exhaustion. "We're trying to make our way north to Canada. We were told we could find help at this place. Your pa said we could bed down here." "The place is safe," she assured him, but the woman continued to look so frightened Frances tried to put her at ease. "My name's Frankie," she said. "Who are you?" The woman gave a little whimper and tugged at the man's sleeve. He shook his head. "We better hide again. Someone else might come." "We'd hear the horses in plenty of time," Frances said. "Please, talk to me." They looked at each other for a moment, and then the man nodded. "I'm Janice. This is my wife. My wife's called Odette. You have any children?" Odette nodded. Our master took our son away from us when he was 5 years old and gave him as a wedding gift to his daughter, who was moving to a city far away. Her voice was dry as though she had run out of tears to soften it. He gave away your son? Frances was horrified. We begged, but it did no good, Odette said. We knew we weren't never going to see our boy again. We wanted to take him and run, but he was gone before we knew about the Underground Railroad. And then 4 weeks ago, we found out Janice was going to be sold, so we ran away. It's not fair. Frances clenched her fists, furious at the man who had caused all their trouble. Families shouldn't be torn apart. She stopped abruptly at the picture of her own family flashed across her mind. Brought some food. Jake's voice behind Frances startled her, and she whirled around. He stood just inside the door, holding a pot that smelled like Margaret's thick meat soup and a cloth-wrapped bundle that probably contained a loaf of bread. This is my son, Frankie, Jake told the couple. He shouldn't have come out here, but we can trust him not to reveal anything. Lancey turned to Frances was serious. You told me you wanted to help. I do, Frances said. Then get back to the house, take some soup to Margaret and Peter. Without a word, Frances turned and ran to the kitchen. By the time Jake returned, she had taken care of the invalids. She'd fed them, and following Margaret's direction, dipped strips of flannel in the mixture of gum camphor and goose oil, wrapped the cloths around Margaret and Petey's throats to help stop their coughing. Megan would have been much better at it, Frances thought. All of Megan's shyness and unsureness disappeared when she comforted and nursed the younger children. Frances fed Margaret and quickly set places at the table for Jake and herself. Jake ate without speaking until his soup bowl was empty. Frances, afraid he was angry because she had gone to the bar, and ate in silence as well. Finally, Jake raised his head and asked, Can you cook? A little, Frances said, thinking of the limited foods her family had eaten. I can make porridge. Fine. In the morning, make plenty. Cook it thick so it'll be filling. Is there enough bread? 2 more loaves is all. I don't know how to bake bread. Jake nodded. I wouldn't expect a boy to. We'll make do. For the first time since they met in the barn, he smiled at Frances. He hadn't spoken yet about Odette and Janice, and Frances couldn't stand it any longer. How long will they be here? She blurted out. Jake lowered his voice. Until the time is right. Till that we hear the bounty hunters have moved on. Frances wanted so much to help Odette and Janice. I'd like to bring them the extra quilt on my bed, she told Jake. They have quilts enough, Jake said. They're not the first to stay here in cold weather. He smiled, but there'll be plenty that you can do for him. I'll let you know when I need you. Oh, yes, Frances answered. I'd do anything. Jake leaned toward her. Frankie, it could be dangerous for all of us if anyone learned about our part in the Underground Railroad. It's important you not let on to anyone that you know that Janice and Odette are here. You must never give away the hiding place. I promise, Frances said. No one will ever learn the secret from me. For the next 2 days, Frances not only tended to the household chores and to Margaret and Petey, but at times carried meals to Janice and Odette. She'd stay and talk to them, and they began to relax and talk to her. When will they go? She asked Jake. As soon as it's safe, someone will let me know. Frances was delighted when Petey grew too energetic to be kept in bed, and when Margaret, still a little weak, rose even before Frances to bake bread. The brick oven warmed the kitchen, and the sweet yeasty fragrance of the rising loaves filled the room. That morning Frances carried in pails of milk alone because Jake had picked up the cough so strong it shook his body. She found Margaret sitting in the wide Boston rocker, snuggling Petey in her lap. Frances, so tired of pretending to be a boy, yearned to be able to curl up on Margaret's lap too. Petey beamed at Frances. Mama sang me 3 songs, and she's going to teach me one about a pony to ride. Mama, Frances took a sudden breath. The word was a blow that stunned and confused her. This was what she'd wanted, wasn't it? For Petey to have someone to love him and snuggle him and care for him in place of the mother who heartlessly sent him away. Margaret reached for Frances's hand. Thank you for your wonderful care, she said. There is much tenderness in you, Frankie. You cared for us as well as any woman could have. Now's the time to tell the truth, Frances thought. I can't stand going on pretending to be a boy any longer. Petey's happy. He has another mother to love him, even if they send me away. There's something I have to explain to you, she told Margaret. At that moment, Jake stumbled into the house, banging the door behind him. His face was flushed, and he dropped into the nearest chair, shaking and coughing. Margaret took Petey down and jumped up. You have a fever, Jake. Come, you need to rest in bed. Jake shook his head. The signs are the weather will be closing in soon. I have to take Janice and Odette to Klaus Mueller's today. You can't, Margaret said stubbornly. You're in no condition to go. They can't stay here. Once the winter storms come, they won't be able to make it to Canada. We'll find someone else who can take them. Maybe Carl Busby. Carl's not part of the railroad. But in this case, we can't take the chance. Frances was terrified, but Jake needed the help she had promised, and so did Odette and Janice. She had no other choice. She tried to sound brave and determined. Let me go. I can do it. Too much for you to handle, Jake said. There's a full loaded corn fire to take, too. Frances was insistent. Janice can help me load the sacks inside the wagon, inside the barn. You know I can take care of the rest. I can keep a secret. Margaret looked at Frances and then at her husband. It's only half a day's drive to the Mueller's farm. Frankie follows the road north. He can't get lost. She turned to Frances. All you have to do is follow the road. It'll take you over the border into Nebraska territory. The river will be low enough to ford easily. The Mueller's farm will be the first one you come to. Jake tried to speak, but he shook with another spasm of coughing. Margaret was firm. Let him do it, Jake. You're so ill, the drive could kill you. I'm sure the bounty hunters must have left the area days ago. Before Jake could answer, Margaret began to pack up the food for Frances, Janice, and Odette. Frances bundled up and hurried to the barn. "It's time to leave," she told Janice and Odette, hoping they wouldn't be able to see the way her hands trembled. We'll make a hiding place for you among the sacks. No one will suspect you're traveling in broad daylight." "Where's your pa?" Janice stared at her with concern. "He's too ill to go," she said. "I'm going to take you." "You're just a child." Frances shook her head. "That's all to the good, I'm thinking. Who would suspect a boy? I'll need you to help me with the sacks. We have a lot to load, and we have to hurry." They worked together quickly, loading the sacks, leaving a trench in the middle where Janice and Odette could lie. They harnessed the horses, laid a canvas sheet over the wagon, and when Frances was satisfied that Janice and Odette were as comfortable as possible, she tied down the canvas on the wagon's four corners. Margaret brought the food to the wagon, 2 parcels, one for Frances, one for Janice and Odette. "Be very, very careful." Margaret hugged Frances tightly. "Stay on the road," she added. "Watch for any sudden changes in the weather." Frances smiled. "I'll get them there all right." She hugged Margaret tightly. She realized how much she cared for Margaret and Jake, who were becoming like family to her. They were good people and kind, and she wouldn't let them down. She hopped up on the seat, clucked to the horses, and drove the wagon down the road, heading north. Frances saw no one else on the road. It was a gray day with a buildup of clouds to the north, and the wind stung her face. At first Frances was nervous and glanced from side to side as the miles went up by. She could relax. She wished Mike and Danny were with her. Wouldn't she love to show Mike how well she could handle a team of horses? He'd probably never let on he was proud of her, but he would be, and Danny would beg to be allowed to handle the reins. She ate the bread and meats that Margaret had prepared for her and looked out across the low, rolling hills, where the grasses shivered in waves and ripples. To the east she caught glimpses now and then of a narrow band of silvery water that twisted through the stands of cottonwoods, aspens, and maples, and a river began to curve to the west, and Frances knew she was getting close to the place where they could ford it. With one gloved hand she rubbed the back of her neck, arcing her shoulders and stretching. Jake and Margaret had no reason to be concerned for her. She had brought the wagon almost to Nebraska, and nothing had happened. Suddenly behind them came shouts and hoofbeats. Frances knew she had relaxed too soon. Terrified, she looked over her shoulder and saw the marshal and the 2 bounty hunters racing toward her.